What if the most powerful Dark Lord in Middle-earth's history once sat across from a cheerful, yellow-booted forest dweller in a conversation that could have changed everything? This isn't some random fan theory. Today we're diving into one of the most mind-bending possibilities hidden in Tolkien's vast mythology. The secret encounter between Tom Bombadil and Morgoth himself during the chaotic First Age. You think you know Tom Bombadil, the jolly fellow who sings to trees, rescues hobbits, and treats the One Ring like a party trick. But what if everything we think we understand about this mysterious being is just the surface? What if his cheerful demeanor and seemingly carefree existence masks something far more ancient and significant than even Gandalf suspected? Let's start with what we know for certain. Tom Bombadil is old, not just old, but impossibly, incomprehensibly ancient. Gandalf himself admits that Tom predates the awakening of the Elves, which puts his origin somewhere in the earliest days of Arda itself. We're talking about a being who was already ancient when the Valar were still shaping the world, when the two trees of Valinor first blazed with light, when Morgoth was still called Melkor and served in the halls of Ilúvatar. Think about the implications of that timeline. During the First Age, when Morgoth ruled from his fortress of Angband and terrorized all of Beleriand with his armies of orcs, dragons and balrogs, Tom Bombadil was already thousands of years old. He had witnessed the very foundation of the world. He understood powers and principles that even the Eldar had forgotten. So when the Dark Lord's shadow fell across Middle-earth like a suffocating blanket, this ancient being was quietly tending his forest, singing his songs and watching everything unfold. But here's where it gets interesting. Tom doesn't just ignore powerful artifacts and beings because he's innocent or simple-minded. When Frodo offers him the One Ring, Tom's complete immunity isn't born from ignorance. It comes from understanding, deep, fundamental comprehension of what the ring is, how it works, and why it holds no power over him. That kind of knowledge doesn't come from books or stories. It comes from being present when the very concepts behind such artifacts were first being explored. Now imagine this scenario. The First Age is drawing to its catastrophic close. Morgoth's power has reached its zenith, but cracks are beginning to show in his empire. He knows the Valar are preparing their final assault. He can sense that his time as the supreme dark power in Middle-earth is running out. In these desperate final years, wouldn't a being of Morgoth's intelligence and cunning seek out every possible advantage, every source of ancient knowledge, every potential ally or threat that existed beyond his direct control? Tom Bombadil represents exactly that kind of unknown variable. A being of immense age and mysterious power who has remained completely neutral throughout all of Morgoth's conquests. No alliance with the Elves, no aid to the Edain, no apparent concern for the vast suffering occurring across Beleriand, just eternal presence in his protected domain, singing his songs while kingdoms rise and fall around him. From Morgoth's perspective, this neutrality would be both intriguing and potentially threatening. Here's a being who clearly possesses power sufficient to maintain absolute sovereignty over his territory, yet shows no interest in the great conflicts reshaping the world. Is he truly neutral, or is he simply biding his time? Does he possess knowledge or abilities that could tip the balance in the coming final confrontation? The meeting, when it occurred, wouldn't have been a dramatic battlefield encounter. Morgoth was many things, but he was never foolish. He understood the value of information, of negotiation, of exploring every angle before committing to a course of action. So picture this, a secret approach perhaps during one of those long twilight periods when Morgoth would sometimes walk the boundaries of his domain, contemplating strategy and surveying his realm. Tom's old forest exists in a kind of temporal bubble where time moves differently and the normal rules of the outside world hold less sway. For a meeting of such cosmic significance, this would be the perfect neutral ground. Neither Morgoth's fortress nor the halls of the Eldar, but a place older than both, where ancient powers could speak without the immediate pressure of armies and alliances. The conversation itself would have been unlike anything else in Middle-earth's recorded history. Two beings of incredible antiquity, each representing fundamentally different approaches to existence and power. Morgoth, driven by his desire to dominate and reshape creation according to his will. Tom, content to simply be, to exist in harmony with the world as it naturally unfolds. Morgoth would have come seeking understanding, not submission, not alliance, but comprehension of how Tom's power operates and why it remains so stubbornly independent. Here was a being who predated even the Elves, who possessed abilities that seemed to transcend the normal limitations of the music of creation, yet who showed no interest in using that power for conquest or domination. Tom's response would have been characteristically cryptic but profound, not the cheerful riddles he shares with hobbits, but ancient wisdom delivered in the kind of deep, resonant voice that speaks to the foundations of reality itself. He might have explained that true power doesn't come from imposing your will on the world, but from understanding your place within the greater harmony of existence. This would have been deeply disturbing to Morgoth. His entire worldview is built on the premise that might makes right, that the strong should rule the weak, that creation exists to be molded according to his vision. Tom's very existence challenges these fundamental assumptions. Here's proof that incredible power can exist without the need for conquest, that ancient wisdom doesn't require dominion over others to validate itself. But the most unsettling aspect of Tom's power, from Morgoth's perspective, would have been its apparent immunity to corruption. Every other being Morgoth had encountered could be influenced, tempted, or at least understood through the lens of desire and ambition. The Elves desired preservation and beauty. Men sought power and glory. Even the Valar themselves had their particular domains and interests that could be exploited or manipulated. Tom desires nothing beyond what he already has. He seeks no expansion of his territory, no increase in his power, no recognition or worship from others. This makes him functionally incorruptible, which represents a form of strength that Morgoth fundamentally cannot comprehend or counter. The meeting would have ended without resolution in any conventional sense. Morgoth would have gained valuable insight into Tom's nature, understanding that this ancient being poses no direct threat to his plans, but also recognizing that Tom's very existence serves as a constant reminder of alternative ways of being that challenge everything Morgoth represents. Tom, for his part, would have seen clearly into the heart of the Dark Lord's corruption, not just the obvious malice and cruelty, but the deeper tragedy of a being who had become so focused on control and domination that he had lost touch with the fundamental joy and wonder of existence itself. This might have evoked not fear or anger, but a kind of cosmic sadness. The long-term implications of this encounter would ripple through the ages. Morgoth's eventual defeat by the host of Valinor might have carried with it a subtle understanding that there are forms of power in Middle-earth that exist beyond the reach of traditional conquest and domination. This knowledge could have influenced how the Valar approached the governance of Middle-earth in subsequent ages. More importantly, Tom's interaction with ultimate evil would have deepened his understanding of the darkness that could arise in creation. When Sauron later emerged as Morgoth's successor, Tom would have recognized the familiar patterns of corruption and domination, but also understood their ultimate limitations. This explains his complete immunity to the One Ring's influence. He had already seen the source from which such power springs and recognized its fundamental weakness. The encounter also provides context for Tom's behavior throughout the later ages. His apparent indifference to the great conflicts and crises of the Second and Third Ages isn't born from ignorance or callousness. It comes from the deep understanding that there are battles which must be fought by those who are part of the world's natural development, while beings like himself serve a different function entirely. Tom's role isn't to intervene directly in the struggles between good and evil, but to maintain spaces where the fundamental goodness and wonder of creation can persist regardless of the temporary victories of darkness. His old forest serves as a kind of sanctuary, not just for trees and growing things, but for the essential spirit of Middle-earth itself. This interpretation also explains why Tom's songs and rhymes carry such power. In Tolkien's mythology, the entire universe was sung into existence through the music of the Ainur. Tom's constant singing represents a continuation of that original creative act, a way of maintaining harmony with the fundamental frequencies that underlie all of reality. When he sings to Old Man Willow or calls to the Barrow-wights, he's not casting spells in any conventional sense. He's reminding these corrupted beings of their original nature, calling them back to their proper place in the greater song. Morgoth, as the great discordant note in the music of creation, would have been both fascinated and repelled by Tom's ability to maintain such perfect harmony. Here was proof that his discord, no matter how powerful, could never fully drown out the original melody. Tom's very existence serves as evidence that Morgoth's rebellion, while destructive and far-reaching, remains ultimately limited in scope. The psychological impact on Morgoth would have been profound. For a being whose entire identity revolves around being the supreme power in Middle-earth, encountering someone who simply doesn't recognize that supremacy would be deeply unsettling. It's not that Tom defies Morgoth's authority, it's that he doesn't acknowledge it exists in any meaningful sense. This kind of existential dismissal is far more threatening to a tyrant than direct opposition. Consider how this encounter might have influenced Morgoth's final strategies. Knowing that there were powers in Middle-earth that remained fundamentally beyond his reach might have contributed to the increasing desperation and recklessness of his final campaigns. The assault on Gondolin, the corruption of the Silmarill's guardians, the eventual overreach that prompted the Valar's intervention, all of these could be seen as the actions of someone who understood that time was running out and that certain kinds of victory would always remain impossible. From Tom's perspective, the meeting would have been educational but not surprising. As a being who predates the corruption of Melkor, he would have retained memories of what the future Dark Lord had been like before his fall. Seeing him as Morgoth would have been like encountering an old friend who had chosen a self-destructive path, tragic but not shocking. This personal history adds layers to Tom's apparent indifference to the great conflicts of later ages. It's not that he doesn't care about suffering and injustice, it's that he understands the deeper patterns at work, the way that corruption ultimately consumes itself while the fundamental goodness of creation endures. His role is to preserve and maintain that essential goodness, trusting that others will handle the more direct confrontations with darkness. The encounter between Tom and Morgoth also illuminates why Tom's power operates so differently from other magical abilities we see in Middle-earth. Elven magic works through preservation and memory. Wizardly power comes from knowledge and will focused through their divine nature. The One Ring's influence stems from domination and control. But Tom's abilities seem to flow from perfect integration with the natural world, a kind of seamless harmony that makes the distinction between self and environment meaningless. This is exactly the kind of power that would be most alien and threatening to Morgoth. His entire approach to existence is based on separation, on establishing himself as fundamentally different from and superior to the rest of creation. Tom represents the complete opposite, a being who has achieved such perfect unity with the world around him that individual will and cosmic harmony become indistinguishable. The theological implications are staggering. In Tolkien's deeply Christian cosmology, Morgoth represents the fallen angel who rebels against divine authority through pride and the desire for independent creation. Tom embodies perfect humility and acceptance of his role within the greater design. Their meeting becomes a kind of theological dialogue between rebellion and acceptance, between the desire to reshape creation and the wisdom to celebrate it as it is. This framework also explains why Tom never leaves his borders to actively oppose evil. It's not cowardice or selfishness, it's recognition that his particular form of resistance requires him to maintain his perfect integration with his domain. The moment he steps outside to engage in conventional warfare, he risks becoming something other than what he is, potentially compromising the very qualities that make his power effective. The ripple effects of their encounter would extend far beyond the immediate participants. Morgoth's servants, particularly the more intelligent ones like Sauron, would have sensed their master's subtle unease after the meeting. They might not have understood its source, but they would have recognized that something had changed in Morgoth's perspective. Some new factor had entered his calculations. This could explain certain patterns in how the forces of evil operate in later ages. The consistent avoidance of Tom's territory by orcs, trolls, and even Nazgul isn't just respect for his power. It's an inherited understanding passed down through generations of dark servants that this particular domain represents something beyond the normal rules of conquest and domination. Sauron himself, despite his vast intelligence and long memory, might never have fully understood why Morgoth chose to avoid direct confrontation with Tom. This incomplete knowledge could have contributed to his own strategic blindness regarding the nature of the opposition he faced. His obsession with the ring and conventional military power blinded him to the deeper spiritual forces that would ultimately defeat him. The encounter also provides a new lens for understanding the broader themes of Tolkien's work. The story of Middle-earth isn't just about the triumph of good over evil in a conventional sense. It's about different approaches to power and existence competing across vast spans of time. Morgoth represents the attempt to impose individual will on reality through force. Tom embodies the alternative path of finding power through harmony and integration. Their meeting serves as a crucial moment where these two philosophies encounter each other directly. Neither can convince the other, neither can defeat the other in any conventional sense, but both come away with a deeper understanding of what they represent and why their approaches are ultimately incompatible. This incompatibility doesn't necessarily lead to conflict in the traditional sense. Tom doesn't become Morgoth's enemy after their meeting. He simply continues being what he has always been, which is itself a form of resistance more powerful than any army or weapon. His continued existence serves as living proof that Morgoth's vision of reality is incomplete and ultimately flawed. The beauty of this hidden encounter lies in how it enriches our understanding of both characters without contradicting anything explicitly stated in Tolkien's published works. Tom's mysterious nature becomes even more intriguing when we consider what kinds of experiences might have shaped his perspective over the eons. Morgoth's ultimate defeat gains additional resonance when we imagine that he had already countered evidence of power that operated according to completely different principles. Most importantly, this meeting helps explain why Middle-earth itself endures. Despite all the darkness and corruption that periodically sweeps across the land, despite the temporary victories of evil and the apparent fragility of good, there remains something indestructible at the heart of the world. Tom Bombadil embodies that indestructible essence, and his encounter with Morgoth serves as proof that no amount of malice or power can truly touch it. The conversation between these two ancient beings becomes a microcosm of the entire struggle that defines Middle-earth's history. It's not ultimately about winners and losers in any conventional sense. It's about different ways of being, different relationships to power and existence, different understandings of what it means to be alive in a world of endless beauty and complexity. When we consider this possibility, suddenly Tom's cheerful songs take on new depth. Every rhyme about butter and honey becomes an act of defiance against the forces that would reduce existence to nothing but struggle and domination. Every moment of joy and wonder in his old forest becomes a victory more profound than any military conquest. The secret meeting between Tom Bombadil and Morgoth reminds us that the most important battles are often invisible, fought not with swords and armies, but with different ways of understanding what life is meant to be. In that sense, their encounter was perhaps the most significant event of the entire First Age, even if no chronicler ever recorded it, and no song ever celebrated its occurrence. And perhaps that's exactly as it should be. Some victories are so fundamental, so essential to the nature of reality itself, that they can only exist in the spaces between recorded history, in the quiet moments where ancient powers meet and recognize each other across the vast expanse of time, and the unbridgeable differences in their understanding of what it means to exist in Middle-earth.